Many of the classes in Motorfest are dominated by one specific car. However, in Street 2, the top two cars are much closer than anyone really thinks, and lately I couldn't stop thinking that as a community we have been gravitating towards the F40 and ignoring the former favorite, so I decided to go back and retest the 993 and the F40 to have a proper comparison, and this video is the results. Let's go! Alright, when I test street cars, I usually take them on two tracks, Kaaa Spirit and Groundworks. Kaaa is all about gutters and acceleration, and Groundworks is all about top speed and high speed cornering. By testing on both of these, you can get a fairly well-rounded picture of a car's performance because each race tests the car in a different way. So naturally for this video, I used both of those tests in combination with a few other things. Here is everything I'm going to use to compare these two cars. Kaaa Spirit, Groundworks, a top speed test with slipstream, an acceleration test, and then guttering, NOS power, cornering, and ease of use. Let's talk about the more subjective stuff first, then I'll get into the actual data and the test results. Starting with the ease of use. The bottom line is the 993 is more difficult to use, and that means it's more difficult to get the most out of it. It doesn't mean that it's worse. It just means you have to work a little bit harder to take advantage of its highest potential. The F40, on the other hand, is very easy to drive. It's super stable in pretty much all scenarios and has a very predictable, very consistent handling. That allows the player to learn quickly how to drive this car fast, and so I give this category to the F40. Moving on to cornering. The 993 has great cornering and a tight turning radius when you compare it to the other fast cars in Street 2, but when you compare it to the F40, it feels like it understeers a tiny bit. There are corners you can take at speed with the F40 with a poor line and still make the corner, whereas if you attempt that same exact thing with the 993, you will absolutely understeer the corner. Now, I don't want to have you mistaken though, the 993 has excellent cornering. It's just that the F40 is better. So 2 for the F40 and 0 for 993. Next, let's talk about NOS power. This is where the 993 really shines. It has one of the most powerful responses to NOS in the class, possibly the most powerful response, but there's really no accurate way to measure that, whereas the F40 is not bad by any means, but it falls short of the 993. What's crazy about these two cars is that when they're compared to other cars in the class, they actually seem unreal. Like if you compare the NOS power of the F40 to that of, let's say, the RX-8, for example, you notice a huge difference in favor of the F40. And you might think the F40 is actually insane. But when you compare the F40 to the 993, you realize the 993's dominance in that department. Anyways, that makes it 2 for the F40 and 1 for the 993. Lastly, in the subjective stuff, let's talk about the guttering. Again, there's no real measurement that we can test here, but if you drive the two cars consistently, you will absolutely feel the difference. In fact, this is exactly the category that shows the biggest separation between these two cars. The F40 is arguably the best guttering car in Street 2, and the 993, although not bad at guttering, is nowhere near the top. In my opinion, this, along with the handling of the F40, is what makes it a choice for the majority of players right now. 3 for the F40 and 1 for the 993. Now you might be thinking that's it, the F40 is the car for me, but there's more to the story, so hang tight. Let's get into the test results and then we can take a look at the side-by-side comparison in my race tests. First, let's look at the acceleration test. I tested each of these on the airport speed trap because it was the best way to consistently show an accurate number. I fast traveled here to the airport, and then from a dead stop, I held 100% of the throttle until I reached the speed trap, and then I recorded the speed trap number. The 993 with no NOS recorded a 157.6, and the F40 had a 152.4. With NOS, the results were consistent, 211.9 for the 993 and 209.7 for the F40. FYI, for the NOS test, I waited until second gear to start using NOS so that the tires would be gripped up and not spinning, and the NOS was actually usable. So obviously this one goes to the 993. It's now 3-2. For the top speed test, I broke it into two different tests because they are two different scenarios, with a slipstream partner and without. Starting with no slipstream, The 993 redlines at 236 miles per hour without NOS and 240 miles per hour with NOS. The F40 is at 235 miles per hour without and 239 miles per hour with. So score 1 for the 993. But when you add a slipstream partner to the mix, the cars are virtually even. Both cars were topped at 238 miles per hour with flashes of 239 without NOS and 244 miles per hour with flashes of 245 with NOS. Honestly, there's just not enough of an advantage here to give a point to either car, so I'm calling it a tie. So at this point, the score is tied 3-3, and so we should move on to the in-race side-by-side examples to see if we can spot any clear differences. Let's start with Kaaa Spirit. Remember, this course is all about gutters, low speed handling, and acceleration. So as you can see, both cars launched at about the same pace, but quickly, if we pause it here at the jump, you can see that the 993 is already ahead due to its better acceleration. Okay, play it. On this first turn at 14%, if we pause it here, you can see the 993 enters the gutter at 169 miles per hour. And then if we move forward just a little bit, you can see that the F40 enters the gutter at 179 miles per hour. That's because the F40 will allow me to enter that gutter faster and still hook it. Okay, play it. The 993 holds its gap through the higher speed turns here at the bottom of the hill, but as we enter the gutter turns to go up the hill, you can see that the F40 starts to reel the 993 back in. And by the time they reach this checkpoint at 77%, it's basically even. So let's see what happens on the way down to the finish line. The F40 absolutely destroys these gutters, and the 993 does fine, but cannot hold the same pace. Now obviously, driver skill definitely comes into play here, but it proves my earlier point. This run with the 993 was definitely clean, but some of the gutters could be optimized a bit more. And that's what led to this F40 victory. This F40 run was my third attempt. I lost traction going across the grass, and I bumped the wall going up the hill, and yet I was still able to make up the time because of how insane this car is at gutters. The thing is, grand races are not always about gutters, so let's take a look at a high-speed course like Groundworks. Upon launch and initial acceleration, we know that the 993 will have the advantage, so of course, at this first checkpoint, it has a slight lead. But that lead kind of dominoes as we ascend up this long straight hill. The 993 uses a little bit less NOS to keep a better pace, where the F40 needs to use more in order to keep its pace. When they start to descend, both cars are able to keep approximately the same pace, and the track layout doesn't really favor one car over the other. All right, I'll let you watch the rest of this race, and then I'll be back at the end for a little bit of commentary, and we'll wrap this thing up. As you can see, the 993 takes it by about a second. And you know, I kind of expected that. You can probably slow down the footage of this entire race and find driving errors in each run that make slight differences, but for the most part, these cars are doing the exact same things. What really happened in this race is that the 993 was able to get out to a better start and then out accelerate the F40 up the hill and then maintain that gap throughout the remainder of the race because it was mostly just high speeds. So now after these two races, the score is still tied 4-4, and these cars are about as even as it gets. So what are the main takeaways here, and who is actually the king of the streets? Unfortunately for this video, but fortunately for the game, there isn't one. The F40 and the 993 are about as even as you can ask for in terms of a racing game like this. They each do something better than the other, and the difference between them is only visible when the track layout caters to one of their strengths. If the track features more gutter and sharp turns, the F40 has the advantage. If it's more dependent on acceleration and keeping high speed, the 993 has the advantage. And if it's an even mixture of both of those things, then the thing we all want to be the case is true. It depends solely on the driver's performance. All right. Remember, if you have questions about this, you can send me a DM on Instagram or Discord. I read every single message that comes my way. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you on the next one. Trigger out.